Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Tell Me Everything Frog Girl Fridays. I'm your host, Danielle Spinelli, and I have Julie David on with us today. I'm super excited because it is something I know nothing about. So, this will be a totally new learning experience for me. And she does a really great job of like trade compliance for dummies. And I totally understand all the things now. Not totally, but I know enough to be able to talk about it. And so that's great. If you guys are watching this, if you're a broker, I highly recommend sending this to a shipper or so that they can send a manufacturer. Like, this is something that I think is very interesting about how the logistics whole supply chain is getting impacted. It's not just us. And I want to say it's refreshing. It's terrible that it's happening, of course, but it's kind of refreshing. It's like, okay, it's not just me getting targeted nonstop. It is the whole supply chain, which obviously is terrible. Hopefully, we can all kind of come together and make things a better place and help mitigate that risk on all levels. So, this is a great way to learn about that. And also, just honestly, like, I feel like the credit card theft thing was very interesting and like the laundering of the money, like maybe that's also happening in our in our part of the industry. We just don't know it. So that's why it's so important to have different angles of the whole logistics supply chain on this, talking about what they're dealing with, because you never know if it's also impacting us as well. And we just haven't caught it yet. So, anyways, let's jump in it.
Tell me everything.
Tell me everything.
Thanks so much for joining me. It's funny because we met at was it the warehouse after dark or what? It was a Christmas.
It was the
something.
holiday party for Supply Chain Social.
Supply Chain Social. Of course, Nathan Cheney always bringing people together. I love it.
The great connector of people.
I know. And it's so funny because whenever I go on there, I'm like, I honestly have no reason to be on there because I'm on a totally different spectrum. But it's really interesting learning just about all the different sides of logistics. And like, that's how you and me started talking as I was talking about being fraud girl. And you're like, you don't even know all the fraud on my end. I'm like, oh my God,
gosh.
let's talk about it.
I know fraud. I've done fraud.
I know. And a totally different perspective. Like while we were talking, I was like, oh my God, you're coming on the show and you're telling all the things.
And I think like the segue into it was, hey, did you know that trade compliance is like totally integrated into the fraud piece? And you're like, no, tell me more.
I know. I'm like, please tell me everything.
Tell me everything. That is the show.
Oh, well, let's start off. And will you introduce yourself and kind of give your background and what all you're doing, what you're doing now and all that stuff?
So my name is Julie David. I have spent the last 14 years working in the capacity of export trade management regulations. But basically, my area of expertise is global trade controls, and I focus on how to get product out of from the United States, outside of the United States, and doing it legally. And there's a lot of different things. It's a very high level of what it is, but there's a lot of different pieces that go into it. And part of it that I spent part of my career in before coming into a trading role was fraud identification and risk mitigation when it comes to identifying red flags in different areas of the business.
Wow. Crazy.
Yeah.
You know, it happens. Like, all this stuff gets out there, but like, cause I was never involved in that part. It's like, I'm sure it sounds so complicated to me.
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating. So I'm one of those people, like, I really like to dig into things. Like when something seems a little off, I really like to like just follow it down the line. And that's, I think, how I got into that fraud detection role. But what's really interesting is from a trade compliance perspective, our jobs are to identify when things don't seem right, when the story doesn't make sense, if there's a piece missing, because you've got transshipment concerns, you've got sanctions and denied parties and licensing and all of that stuff that goes into getting product from the United States out to your customers and making sure you're doing it legally. The different areas of the business have different definitions of fraud. And at the like very base of it, it's just people are misrepresenting themselves in order to do nefarious things.
Right.
They want to get whatever you have and they want to do it however they can. And that most often leads to your business being out money, being out product. And depending on how big this whole supply procurement type of thing, I mean, it's illicit procurement channels is basically what it is. So really the fraud is a symptom of a much bigger thing. And that falls squarely within the trade compliance space. So a large part of my career has been spent trying to integrate trade compliance into the different business units because there are things like fraud detection that we do really well and that we can help with that. And it certainly leads towards, and it's, like I said, a symptom of a much bigger problem, which is illicit procurement channels.
Yeah, totally. And last time we talked to you, you were mentioning how kind of like just the different divisions with your job or old job or whatever it was, how you guys had different types of fraud, but you guys came together and were like, hey, let's do like a little fraud task force type thing and like internally talk and like how do we, because sometimes it's like they do the same they do the same thing over and over again. It's just to different people on different levels. So then it's like,
Yeah.
oh, that happened to you. Wait a second, that happened to me. And like, so that's
Yeah.
kind of a
And
way
then
to
you're
get ahead of it.
And you're spending money too on tools and resources in each of the different business units to try to basically do the same thing, which is
Yeah.
identify and stop fraud from happening because it can cost your business a lot of money
Hmm.
in the long run. Whereas, if you have all of the areas that are have a vested interest in fraud detection and mitigation, if you have them all together on a regular basis and talking about, what it is that they're seeing, maybe another department already has a tool that's available, like trade compliance. A lot of organizations have denied party screening tools that they can leverage in order to be able to maybe add a gray list to detect addresses or individuals or whatever. Because just because you find and you stop one person from
Yeah.
ordering from you, they'll just create a shell company or they'll come and misrepresent themselves again, and they're going to continue to hit you with fraud. So yeah, and you can save money as far as like tools and being able to leverage because at the end of the day, each business unit is separate, but they're all part of the same organization and they're all part of the same company trying to save money, grow business, and do it legally. So everybody has the same mission. It's just
Right.
sometimes they work parallel with each other.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Sometimes you don't even know that another department's doing something. So what
Yeah.
was your like first like how did you initially were like woke up to like this is fraudulent or oh this is we're getting scammed or whatever. How did you like what was your first moment where you woke up to that?
Honestly, I think it was credit card for and trying to work and finding out that you're saying the same thing as another business unit, but you're saying it differently. So it was, basically like, hey, we're identifying this problem. And they were like, yeah, cool. It happens. It's the cost of doing business. It's like, no, it's a symptom of a bigger problem.
Yeah.
And it was like, yeah, but it's cost of doing business and trying to find the right people and to really like champion that this is a problem. Like
Mhm.
this will continue to be a problem and will cost us a lot of money and potentially will lose our ability to be able to maybe process credit cards,
Yeah.
which if you're an online company or any
Right.
business is trying to do any transactions, not being able to take credit cards is huge,
Right.
or the cost of being able to take credit cards is huge. But even like going into and working with other areas of the business when it comes to like counterfeit product or money laundering, or so it wasn't that I necessarily like fell specifically in like champion the fraud piece of it. It was just that I have always had this calling to educate and
Yeah.
to bring awareness to things. And it just happened that fraud was a big enough piece that I was able to join a team and work together to be able to identify what that looked like, create different automation tools to be able to detect it in order to
Mhm.
lower the cost of fraud for the business, and then eventually be able to put together a business case to bring in a third party that does that all day long. There's companies out there that they track your cookies online and can determine when you're shopping if you're a legitimate buyer or if you've got a high risk profile, and they'll alert you.
Wow.
So
That's wild.
yeah, it's really cool. Like, when you're like, "Yes, take all of my cookies," and it's because they're tracking you.
Yeah. Right. Well, I knew that they were, and it's kind of
Yeah.
convenient whenever you're going to like, any other website and they're like, "Hey, this is an advertisement based on something else you buy." You're like, "Yeah, I do. This is what I like to buy."
Yeah.
I'm all
Thanks,
for
Facebook.
cookies. Yeah, exactly.
How did you know I was looking that on Amazon on my
I know.
phone, and now you're showing this to me on my computer? This
How
is
do you know in
creepy.
the world? Right. It's so crazy. I wish some people are like freaked out by it, but I love it. Like I think it's just great.
Big Brother's always looking, but yeah. But I mean, those type of companies utilize those online profiles based off of your cookies and
Mhm.
then can alert, your company like, "Hey, this person has like a high." I'm not even gonna try to understand the algorithms because those are from people that are way smarter than me. But basically, they do something with your cookies and they can determine, yeah, when somebody places an order, this is a legitimate person and a legitimate buyer. Hey, this has got a high risk profile to it, and it diverts for somebody to take a look at it.
So dumb down like credit card fraud. Obviously, I know what credit card fraud is, but like
Yeah.
dumb it down in a way where it's like these are like tell signs that you are getting frauded instead of just like a cancellation or whatever. Like if I was new to trade compliance, I was new to ecom, how would I know? How do I know what to look for?
And sometimes you don't with credit card fraud, but it's more of a piece of the puzzle, depending on what or what industry you're in. And so I came from the electronics industry. There are certain products that are at a higher risk of being part of a fraudulent transaction. Thermal cameras, solid state drives, memory devices. There are just certain things
Sure.
that are not a high dollar value, but they're a high risk commodity, and they're especially with like thermal imaging cameras, they can be used in missile
Crazy.
technology. They can be used in like all sorts of nefarious things, and they don't cost a lot of money, and they're very easy to move because they're not very big.
Yeah.
And so the bad actors will get their hands on the dark web with credit cards. I've had my credit card number stolen. It sucks,
Right. Yeah.
but
Me too.
yeah, and until it's been flagged or detected, by the credit card companies as a fraud, or that the credit card number has been stolen, it can go in. But again, it's part of like the bigger picture. That
Sure.
credit card piece might not even come into play until later, not until the chargeback happens. But looking at the products, looking at where they're shipping, does the billing address match where you're shipping it to, and does it make sense if it doesn't match up? Is it shipping to a place in the United States that has is a high volume point of export? So is it going to like a border city in Texas or California or Delaware, Florida, any of those places that have more logistics and freight companies that are located? Like the business in those areas are not necessarily manufacturing, but they are
Yeah.
for shipments. So those are all key indicators that there's potentially like an international flavor to it. But I've
Gotcha.
seen instances of just older people being contacted and, hey, I'm going to have a shipment sent to your house. I'll send you a label. And as soon as you get it, can you plop that label on there and kick it back out? And, those poor
Crazy.
people are involved in a fraudulent transaction.
I know. It's crazy how they really pry on the elderly. It's sad. My grandparents were
Yeah.
part of something where my grandparents had a call where it was said that one of us cousins or one of the grandkids
Yes.
were like in jail or whatever. And like none of us get in trouble. So I'm surprised that they even fell for this. Like I was even like, we're not even like that. But anyways, and so they had to wire X amount of money. So like my grandma's frantically going to the bank, wiring, and the bank was even like, "I don't think this is real. I don't think this is real." And she's like, "You have to do this." And yeah, I'm like, it's so
It's
sad.
yeah, it's really sad, and just the fact that it continues to happen. I know there's a lot of education out there too, especially for the elderly community, about not falling prey to these type of things, because I think our generation is more like skeptical. Like we
Yeah.
grew up in that like pre-digital but also, digital age,
Yeah.
that we're naturally skeptical. I would like to think that,
I agree.
if anybody ever calls and it's my daughter, being kidnapped or whatever, I'd be like, yeah, right, I can track her right now.
You're like, "Let me call Liam Neeson right now." And
Right.
then if he can't get involved, then it's not real. That's
Yeah, it's
funny.
for sure not legit. But yeah, I mean, I think that especially with those generations that they weren't around necessarily with the digital, they're more
Right.
trusting and just not as skeptical. A nice person comes up and says, I could really use your help. I'm going to
Right.
send you this package and I'll give you this label, and just for your troubles, I'll give you a couple $100 for helping me out. And gosh, I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And, now they're part of this whole scheme of being able to procure. And again, this is part of that bigger problem of these illicit procurement channels
Yeah.
and they've really ramped up quite a bit, especially after the Russian invasion in February of 2022, when Russia was essentially just cut off from the world trading area. Like they don't
Interesting.
yeah, they can't easily gain access to anything, and they're cut off from the SWIFT banking system, so they can't easily pay for things or receive payment for things. And so they had to get creative, and there's shell companies that are popping up more frequently in Hong Kong and China.
Hmm.
Iran too has been really ramping up with their
Wow.
UAV and drone productions, and of course things can't get directly to Iran without going through transshipment points. So when we're talking about these fraudulent transactions, trade compliant, like export trade people, were used to spotting these different red flags, and we don't know that other areas of the business need to know about this stuff until they come and say, hey, I have this transaction and it seems weird. Can you take a look at it? And
Yeah.
now we're looking at it, we're like, yeah, you're totally right. There's red flags all over this. And it might not necessarily be the parts, but it could be where they're shipping to. When you're talking about financial fraud, especially in the accounting teams, net 30 accounts and credit cards, it's not so much, but because those are a little bit harder to detect unless there's like a flag on it at a higher level. But you have a company that comes in and places an order, you give them a net 30 account, they've got $2,000 that they've ordered from you, they send in like a $5,000 wire transfer, and you're like, whoa, like that's not what you owe. And they're like, oh, just keep it on the account, and we'll just decrement off of it as we
Hmm.
buy. But they never buy again, and maybe like a month or two later they come back and say, hey, can you send me back that money. And
Wow.
now, you now potentially just laundered funds depending on, the circumstances. And the red
Yeah.
flags to look out for that is when you receive the wire transfer to begin with, is it coming from who is your customer? Because
Yeah.
if it's not, there's a red flag. Why is this company paying for your order? That's the
Yeah.
question that you can ask to clarify. When they come in and ask for a refund, the question you looking at, am I sending the money back to the bank from which it came? Am I sending it back to my customer? Because if it's not going there, best practice would be to have a policy in place that you only send the funds back to the bank from which they originated or back
Yeah.
to your customer's bank account. But if it's going back to an entirely different party, hey, why are we depositing money into this account? And
Right.
it most likely is you're laundering funds.
Crazy. I know.
Yeah.
So the laundering funds thing, I think it became more like obvious with like Ozark or like what was the one with like the three girls when they go shopping and they return everything that was on Netflix? I can't remember the name
Oh, you know
even.
what? Since I've been back in school, well, like the last 2 years, I have been awful about saying so like I at trivia night, I am worthless. What's
Uh,
going on in current events? I don't know. If it has nothing to do with export controls or sanctions or tariffs, I have no idea what the heck is going
yeah.
on.
I'll have to send that one to you because it's like basically what you're talking about. And like it's like three moms that like go and buy, they get told from like the cartel to go buy whatever and then they return it. And so they do it like
Yes.
in mass amounts and then they're laundering money. It's wild.
There was it that one where they shoot. I know which one you're talking about with the girl from Mad Men?
Yes, from Mad Men. Yes, I
Yeah, yeah,
know.
yeah. Shoot. And the
We'll
girl.
figure it out, clip it in here. I can't remember what
Yeah,
it's
it's gonna
called.
drive me insane, but yeah, and even, like, the younger sister of the redheaded girl,
Yeah.
she's the voice of Tinkerbell. I don't know if you knew
Oh,
this
I
or
didn't
not.
know that. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, she's the voice of
Fun
Tinkerbell, but
fact.
yeah, I know what you're talking about where it was, like, they were, even bringing, like, trafficking drugs using the wrapping paper,
Yeah,
wasn't it? Or wallpaper or something like that?
something,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, wild.
Yeah,
Yeah,
all
which
these
I guess
different
that's
creative ways that people
right,
can
and so,
get
like
around the law.
I know, that goes to show, like, just how creative they have to get to in order to launder the money because people like you are out there seeing these things, and you're like, "Hey, no, we're not
Yeah.
returning this to wherever, we're returning it back," and they're like, "Oh, crap, they're onto us," you know?
But I mean, talking about like purchasing, returning stuff, counterfeit products is another place where, a customer comes and buys something from you and they say, I don't need these parts anymore. Can I send them back? Well, they keep the parts,
Mm,
the legitimate parts, and then they send back these counterfeit products. And if you don't
wow,
have a good process on the return side to identify counterfeit product, now you're accepting that counterfeit product into your stock and potentially putting it back on your shelf for somebody else to buy,
right,
but you're also refunding money. So now you're out the legitimate product, you're out the money for that legitimate product, and you potentially have counterfeit product on your shelves that will go out to another customer, which can
what a
jeopardize
nightmare.
your
Yeah,
brand and like everything. There's just so many different instances like we talked about before where like
yeah.
corporate fraud definition is like misrepresenting in order to, you know, do bad things to your company. But when you're looking at all the different areas of the organization, there's so many different nuanced definitions of what fraud is to different areas.
Yeah, totally. So the counterfeit stuff, how often would you say that happens? Is that like a pretty often thing or not as often as like the other things?
It's not infrequent that you shouldn't be aware of it.
Gotcha.
I mean, especially like in the electronics industry, when you're talking about like barcoding and traceability and stuff like that, there's certainly been things that have been put into place to mitigate this.
Yeah.
And so, like, from like a whole industry perspective, there are things so it's big enough that there have been things that have happened within supply chain, like introduce the traceability and barcoding and detecting different markings and stuff like that from
Yeah.
different manufacturers. But it's not frequent enough that I've been like, oh, this is like a worldwide problem that we need to
Yeah.
get on right now. It's not quite like that, but somewhere in the middle. I mean, it's like I said, it's big enough that people have come together and said we really should create a
I'm sure with certain
traceability.
products too, like luxury brands, and I'm sure that's like the biggest thing.
Yeah, and again, in the electronics industry, when you're looking at the different export controls that have been coming into place for, semiconductors and computers and electronics devices,
Mhm.
and the need for them in places like Russia, where they're building drones and missiles and trying to keep up with their arsenal to be
Yeah.
able to continue their war. The electronics are huge because it's not all mechanical anymore. Everything is driven by electronics.
Yeah, and it's not just like TVs anymore either, because that was
No.
the big thing, like TVs and PlayStations and whatever. Now it's like
Yeah.
anything and everything electronics they can do something with. Because even like I know like some of the lithium battery stuff, or maybe it's not lithium battery. It's one of the batteries. Like that's a
Mhm.
rare thing as well. So like they'll even just steal whatever just to get the batteries out of it.
Yeah, and there was, news reports coming out of Russia early on that they were, like, basically taking apart, like, washing machines and microwaves to be able to get the electronics out of them because they weren't able to easily procure electronics anymore to be able to continue to build drones
Oh
and
wow.
and even repair, like, their technology. They were scavenging out of other electronic devices in order to get the electronics that they needed.
Interesting. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just don't know any of this stuff happens unless you're in the thick of it, you know?
Yeah, and there's even, there's an I think they're a nonprofit organization out of the Netherlands, I believe, the Conflict Armament Research Society, or it's CAR, but they are a bunch of former UN peacekeepers that are in Ukraine, and they're taking, like, these downed drones, and they're reverse engineering them and tracing back the products from the battlefield to
What?
where they originated, and a lot of that is finding a lot of counterfeit product. So, like, while they think that they are looking at, a major electronics manufacturer's chips,
Right.
it's really a counterfeit piece that was, manufactured in China to be like that, but it wasn't really,
Wow.
what it is. But they're also finding a lot of electronics that did originate in the United States that are, again, part of that procurement, that illicit procurement where US companies are doing the right thing, but there are people that know your business and know the export laws well enough to be able to get around
Mm.
the export regulations in order to get those electronics to then fund the war machine in Russia and Ukraine.
Wow. My mind is blown. That's
So, like,
insane.
I geek out about this stuff. Like,
Oh,
this is
yeah. Oh, no, I
like,
do too. That's why I have a
it's
show about it. I'm like,
fascinating.
"This is so cool." I mean,
It is
it's not
so
cool, but,
fascinating.
it's very fascinating, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not as, sexy as tracking down, over the road
Well, I
big cases of, like,
even that's, really fun too. Like, I just had a or it wasn't a customer, it was a person on LinkedIn. They had, like, $1,000,000 worth of beef stolen, and they found it before it even
yeah.
went bad. I'm like, "That's insane." But
Well,
I think
even,
that they'll
like,
claim it out, but
the Great Canadian Maple Syrup Heist.
right, right.
Like, just yeah, so, I mean, there is no industry that is exempt from this type of behavior. So, again, coming from the electronic space, the biggest thing with combating and trying to, mitigate that risk to an organization is education, and that's
Mhm.
always been something that I've been very, very passionate about. I'm a huge champion of compliance when it comes to educating and reaching out and integrating into the business, and that's led me to where I am now, working for a company that specializes in trade compliance training and doing all of this reach out and networking. And because it is a passion project of mine, I strongly believe that a strong culture of compliance to mitigate things like fraud come
Right.
from education and outreach and understanding.
Totally. So the different departments, I guess, like, what are the main different departments that would be touched by fraud that you would say?
Oh, I mean, directly, you're looking at your accounting teams, obviously, because they're dealing with the finances.
Mhm.
You would be looking at any of, like, your product management teams that are managing your supply chain, so procurement and supply chain, product management. Your warehousing teams that are coming
Okay.
in contact with the paperwork because documentation fraud is another, I mean, you could receive something that, uh, is showing a country of origin or information that doesn't match up with what is actually on the product, and it could be to evade import fees and taxes.
Mm.
So you got that piece of it. Trade compliance. It's not that trade compliance has a direct impact in fraud. It's that trade compliance is poised the best to help identify red flags and help provide tools and resources to help the other areas identify it. But your sales and your customer service teams, for sure, that are receiving those phone calls and those orders from either clients placing orders or people trying to return or have an issue with their product because I ordered this and it never showed up. Can you just refund me my money? That's another, it's not common, but it's another piece of it. So I don't really think that there is a business unit in an organization that doesn't have some kind of a risk of
Yeah.
fraud. It's just in different pieces of it. Your quality team for counterfeit products but they're going to work closely with your warehousing teams to make sure that things, because they're more of like the trade compliance for counterfeit
Yeah.
more than anything. So working hand in hand with the quality teams to identify that and educate and try to figure out what to do if you do receive counterfeit product, and how to handle that.
Wow. It's wild. So I know one of the one of the things that you talked about with me was, how like the same like it was basically going back to the shell accounts, how they'll keep
Mhm.
calling in on different accounts and
Yeah.
eventually like the salespeople will be like, huh, I just turned this guy away and he sounds exactly the same to this next guy that called.
Yeah.
Um I guess if you could
They'll
elaborate on that.
change well, they change, yeah, where they're shipping to. So I've seen instances of an individual that just keeps coming back and they rebrand themselves. They've got a new shell company because in places like Hong Kong, it's very easy to just pay your $250 and now you have a new
Yeah.
corporate entity to stand up, but they'll represent themselves as a legitimate business. So as you're doing your due diligence and knowing your customer and doing your research, it's like, oh, this company really exists. This is where we're shipping it to. And then, those people that the bad actor will call the legitimate company and be like, I don't know what happened. They shipped it to the wrong address. When you get it, can you just give me a call and I'll come pick it up? Yeah. And so, and you don't know that until maybe you've got a company that wants to do the right thing and they contact, the shipper and they're like, hey, I got this package. I didn't order it, but this guy contacted me and said, you guys shipped it to the wrong place and he's going to come pick it up. Can you, confirm, is this legit? And it's like, no, we're going to
Right.
send you, we'll send you an RMA. No, we want that back. Thank you though.
So, like, best practices, I guess, for just like random Joe out there is just like what you said. If you have like some sort of weird, a lot of times it's like just trust your gut. Like, if you get spidey
Yeah.
senses, like something's going off.
Yes.
But yeah, if you're getting somebody asking you to move a shipment from here to there or relabel it or have them drive over there, pick it up, like stuff like that, that's like
Yeah.
huge red flag, and you should always verify.
I always, when I train it out, when you're talking about the big thing is you want to know your customer. You want to understand the transaction. And if it doesn't make sense, like if you're reading the story and there's a piece like it goes from, point A to point C and point B is missing, ask questions because
Yeah,
it's just possible that there was some information that was omitted, not intentionally. It's probably a legit order. So ask the questions, let's get it clarified
yeah,
and then, most likely we can resume. But the best practice is to know your customer, know your business, know what it is that they're doing with the product and if they're ordering like BIS has this great example of these like if they're ordering high-end lasers for this small bakery, probably not legitimate.
right. Yeah. So it's almost like
Just
looking up the customer and the address and where they're sending it to, like,
mhm,
what it are they sending it to a bakery, like you were
yeah.
just mentioning, like
Or are they ordering a bunch of high-end electronics and shipping it to a chocolate factory in Dubai? And
yeah,
that's like a legit one that I've seen before, and it's like, "This makes no sense." "Oh, it's because I have the import stuff to be able to bring it into Dubai, but my friend that's ordering it doesn't, so I'm just doing him a favor." No.
yeah,
Dubai, UAE is a high transshipment point for places like Iran and other areas of the world that the US is not would require a license in order to engage in. And so
mm,
those are all again red flags. If it doesn't make sense, like you said, if your spidey senses are tingling, ask some questions. And if you don't know what questions you need to ask, that's when you bring your trade compliance team in and
yeah,
say, hey, something isn't right with this order. I'm not really sure what it is, but can you take a look at it and let me know if you need any additional information? And most of the time, when I was in that practitioner space, I always tried to make sure that I would circle back to that sales rep or whoever it was that brought it to my attention and said, hey, you did good with this one. And here's what I found. So, like, because
yeah,
that's an education opportunity. It's not, you weren't losing your mind. You weren't
yeah,
being paranoid. Like, you,
yeah,
your instincts were right on this one. And this is what I found. And
interesting, yeah,
that helps bridge that gap, though, that create that relationship between trade compliance and the other business units. Because most of the time, trade compliance is seen as the department that comes in and doesn't want you to do business. We don't
right,
want you to get those sales. We shut everything down. We're the no department. And that's not true. If we
right,
come in the 11th hour and shut something down, it's because you should have brought us in at the beginning. And we could have helped facilitate this the whole way instead of having to come in and make sure that it's all right on the end of it. So,
mhm,
circling back and saying, hey, good job on this one, that helps build that relationship between you. And then now all of a sudden something comes up and that sales rep hears somebody else saying, hey, I have this, I don't know what to do with this. And she says, go to trade compliance and ask the question. They're like, oh no, they always shut everything down. They're a pain in the butt. And now you've got a champion out in the business that says,
right,
that's not true. I sent something over there and she did the research and I was right. And she came back and told me I was right. It was awesome,
yeah,
and now you've got this compliance champion out in the business for you. But the big thing is identifying red flags and knowing what those are, because most of the time when you're working on something, if you don't know why, but you definitely have that, oh, something doesn't feel right with this,
right,
right? You might not understand why it doesn't feel right, but you need to know who to go to with that. And that's where like the training and education pieces come into.
yeah. I am huge on training and educating. I think the biggest thing with that is knowing, like we kind of mentioned earlier, but like, hey, this fraud is happening here. Eventually, they could, if they get success in this. I mean, we have to be right 100% of the time. They have to be right
Yeah.
1%. Once they know
Yeah.
there's a hole and like, oh, that worked with this guy. Maybe I can get to this other department if I like tweak it a little bit, but it's a similar
Yeah.
type of ammo. I can do it that way. And I think kind of like what you mentioned with getting everybody involved in it and going back and kind of like giving recognition for doing a good job. I think that also goes to, like, everybody really kinda loves being a detective, like, how much you and
Yeah.
me geek out over it. I think everybody really does. That's why detective shows are big, and that's why, like,
Yeah.
people love that. It's like, I think getting everybody on board, like, "Hey, if you solved a crime, like, I want you to know you solved a crime. Like, this is so cool," you know?
I have like, speaking of that, I had the opportunity to work really closely with, the different sales and business teams internationally, and of
Mhm.
course, like, I can't go wherever it is in the world. I mean, I can, but it's not financially feasible for my company to send me to all the places that I need to go and
Right.
check out. So we have some companies have international teams, and I did have one that I worked with, and anytime I would call, I'm like, "Hey, if you happen to be in this area, can you drive by this location and let me know?" Because, like, the Google Maps is from, like, 7 years ago, and it looks fairly industrial. It looks like it might be, like, a freight collection point. It does not look like a manufacturing point, and they're trying to tell me it is.
Yeah.
And, like, this person never failed. Like, it was, like, the best part of his day of being able to go in. I would get these pictures and, like, everything back. He's like, "Yeah, I went and looked in the windows," and,
Oh my god, how
there was, like, a
fun.
computer monitor on the desk, but it was covered in dust, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I just needed you to do a drive-by to
Yeah,
make
don't get
you
shot out there.
don't get shot or arrested," but it was like, anytime I would call, it was like, "Yeah, well, I'll be there tomorrow."
I know. I think people really love it. I think building that compliance culture, that's why it's so big because people really do want to help and be involved. Like, it's not like anybody's not wanting things. But I mean, on the other hand, I was in sales. I get it. Like, you need to
Yeah.
sell, but there's that, oh,
It's
this is
easier to
weird.
ask for forgiveness, and it's like,
Yeah.
not with legal stuff, though.
Well, and even like at the end of the day, even being in sales, like if something happens, a lot of times it comes back on you, right? Like you get that
Yeah,
deducted from you. And it's like that could have been, you could have shut that one down and had more opportunity and more time to work on a
yeah,
legitimate sale and increase your margins. Like once we just on the over the road stuff, whenever we started like a whole compliance culture, we were a small company, but if we had one theft, like it was like very devastating to the company. I mean, not like door
yeah.
shutting, but close. And
Yeah, but you're talking, like, hundreds of millions of dollars sometimes, like, some of
yeah,
these bigger companies
crazy.
are able to mitigate by just putting some simple steps in place, like
Yeah,
educating and, having a point of contact for those red flags to go.
definitely. So I guess that's what was my next question. So what are the biggest things like I'm just now learning about this and I'm, whatever and I'm like, "Hey, how do I even get started? What do I do?"
Yeah. So, I mean, if the company already has a established and existing trade compliance program, and you're a new employee, the easiest point is having that new employee training and doing the annual refresher on top of that. So, being able to educate like what a red flag is, what to look forward to, or what to look for when you're processing a sales transaction, or if you get a phone call from a customer. It's just that just this exists, and these are some of the things you should look forward to or look for in your transaction. And
Mhm.
if you have any questions or you're not 100% sure, this is where you go with that. And
Yeah,
it's just, I mean, it's very simple. It can take 10, 15 minutes once a year. And it's probably one of the easiest and cheapest things that a company could do to mitigate that risk.
interesting. Yeah, to me, I think it's just taking the time to do it.
Yeah.
That's where people don't do it.
And most employees, they wanna be right. They
Mm,
wanna do the right thing.
right,
Nobody is intentionally, unless they are, intentionally doing it, but nobody intentionally wants to break the law.
right.
And everybody wants to do the right thing, and everybody wants to have that story of, "Oh, yeah, this one time I had this order and it seemed weird, and I sent it to Julie in compliance, and she called me back and said, 'Yeah, this is part of a Russian illicit procurement ring for electronics in Russia, and I caught it. This is so stinking cool.'"
Yeah. I helped defend the war. I mean, what? Can you
I helped
imagine?
defend Ukraine. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, and it might seem, we laugh, we're joking about it, but it's really like it's really cool to
Mhm.
be a part of that and
I can't even
to
imagine. Yeah.
like have that story and just know like and again like I always I you had mentioned earlier like 100% of what we see is usually like the icky stuff and like 1% of like the sales what the salespeople see or whatever like they
Right.
have a very small opportunity to be exposed to this but it doesn't mean that they can't be exposed to it
Right.
so in my experience doing like a lot of like the corporate outreach and the education is you can say you need to be aware of this and looking for red flags and doing all this different stuff. And they're like, yeah. What are the odds? And if you can back that training up with actual like internal case studies, well,
Hmm.
just 3 months ago, this is what we stumbled
Yeah.
upon, and this is how it was brought to our attention. And 4 months before that, we caught this, and last year we had 2 instances. If you can bring it back and show that it's, we're not just sharing a
Yeah.
unicorn with you, like this
Right.
this horse with a horn on its head actually exists.
Yeah.
That usually helps because if you're not linking it back to like, no, we really do come across these things, they're not going to take it as seriously. And it's
Right.
just an added thing that adds to, the time that I have to spend on doing what I'm doing. But that's been my experience is having that you can do the training, the computer based training, which is effective and is efficient. But sometimes you have to get out in the organization and have like a presentation, have a discussion.
Yeah.
That
Like
also builds that
storytelling.
relationship. Yeah,
Yeah.
that builds that relationship though too, because then they're like, "Oh yeah, that girl," and hopefully, if you do it right, yeah, that trade compliance manager Julie came and like she had this like wild story, and oh, I think I have one. I wonder if this could be like her next wild story that she shares with the business.
Right.
So it's just kind of getting them wrapped up in that excitement. How you recruit people into work in trade compliance, or how this is all part of that. Trade compliance is boring. Honestly, the regulations are so boring.
Yeah.
They're awful to read.
That's funny.
But like if you can show that if you can get through this boring piece of it, it is really fascinating. And when you're
Yeah.
looking at things that are happening in the world and then how they're translating over into what actually affects your business from a trade compliance perspective. I mean, Russia invaded February 24th of 2022. And so within 24 hours, everybody in the world knew what a sanction was. Everybody in the world
Yeah.
knew what export controls were. And all of a sudden, export trade managers were having their moment. Like we were like, yeah, we do this all the time. Like you
Yeah.
never invite us to meetings. This is what we do.
We're here. We're just in the
Well,
dungeon working.
we're,
Leave me
we're
away.
don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain, like, but really, like, you should be paying attention. There's a famous Ruth Bader Ginsburg quote about how women should be in all the places where decisions are made. I love that quote, but also trade compliance should be in the rooms where all the decisions are made
Yeah.
because there's things in contracts that you might not be able to sign off on because they affect. There might be a trade compliance or an export trade clause in there that you can't agree to. Expanding business in a different part of the world, there could be added risks that you're not aware of because you're not bringing your trade compliance people in.
Yeah.
You want to expand business in Hong Kong, well, it's a high transshipment point and there's not a lot of manufacturing that happens there. And if you brought us in, I could tell you that most likely you're going to see an increase in fraud transactions that are happening, shell companies that are doing business with us
Huh.
that are not legitimate business. And will be a part of a lot of investigations that we probably don't want to be a part of because products are
Yeah.
being routed through Hong Kong and going into places that we don't want them to. But these are all, again, like incorporating trade compliance into the different areas of the business. We don't want to shut the business down. We won't have a job. If business isn't going well, we want it to expand, but we want you to do it legally. Because at the end of the day, if you're not doing it right, the only people that are going to have a job at the end of it are us trade compliance people that are having to fix everything after a huge
Yeah.
investigation rolls through.
Right. Well, and
And that's not the kind of job I want.
yeah, a lot of times you want it where your compliance person, and this is even over the road, this is in every part, I think, of logistics, your compliance person is doing a good enough job where you don't even know that all this risk is there because they're there doing all the
Yeah.
forefront and the
You have processes
pre-vetting
in
and the
place
yep.
and yeah, you got the procedures and the work instructions are written in a way that you don't even realize that you're doing that because it's a trade compliance thing. It's just
Mhm.
part of the normal business.
Yeah. I think it's funny because whenever there's time to like cut corners or they need to
Oh,
cut costs or
yeah.
whatever, that's like the first thing that goes. And it's
Yes.
like, if only you knew that taking that part out is exposing you to so much more like
Yeah.
losses.
And I will speak directly to every professional that is part of that risk determination for that corner cutting. Document if you don't agree with the decisions being made by the higher ups, and they're going to go forward anyways because they're willing to accept that risk. Put it in writing. Just want to clarify from our email today that we were discussing this. I suggested this. You guys are opting to go this direction. If I've misunderstood it, please let me know. And now it's documented, and you have a CYA for you.
Interesting.
Yeah,
That's crazy. So, I know that you have been talking a lot about like training and, getting kind of everybody on board on that. So that's what your company does, right? Or what exactly
yeah.
do you guys do? And if you can spell that out and all that jazz.
Yeah. So I work for a company called Skill Dynamics. Prior to that, it was Content Enablers, and we specialize in trade compliance training, specifically designed to educate people from general awareness through focusing on trade compliance specifics for job functions, because an engineer doesn't need to know the same thing as a marketing person or an HR person,
Mhm.
all the way up through trade compliance professionals, leadership, and we also have topical stuff. So we can address cybersecurity, we can address anti boycott laws, money laundering, anti corruption, CPA, UK anti bribery, all of that. So when we talk about the training pieces of it, and I'm not passionate about the training because I work for Skill Dynamics and that's what we do. I work for Skill because I am passionate about education and training and championing that trade compliance piece. And what's really cool is I get to be responsible for the content. So I get to meet with other trade compliance people in the world and listen to what it is that they feel like they're missing. And if we don't have it, we can create it. And then
That's
it's
cool.
available to help others. So our training is designed, we've got a short general awareness that just introduces, like we talked about, like this
Yeah.
is this is what trade compliance is. This is what you should be looking out for. This is, your very short 12, 13-minute snippet. And if you have any questions, go to your trade compliance people. The next step up would be, okay, you work in sales and order processing. Here is a more detailed trade compliance awareness course for you that's about 45 minutes long that talks about, red flags from a sales perspective or a marketing person's perspective or IT or even leadership, talking about the importance of having a comprehensive compliance program in place and supporting it and investing in it and the risks to your business if you don't do this. And then even for practitioners like me, we've got courses out there that help provide education and authorizations and export clearance, foundations of trade compliance on the import side, which is not my area of expertise. I come from the exports side of the house, but we do have a lot of import training as well that talks about responsibilities in the import process, proper valuation, proper classifications to mitigate risk for fines and penalties for imports.
I think the biggest thing is like you may think you know all the things and you've seen all the things, but
Yeah.
hiring somebody outside too, like it does make a big difference. Like I think even just like with where I'm at, like I hear all the stories. Same with you, I'm sure. We hear all the
Yeah.
stories. So it's like I hear all the weird things. And whenever I'm building like an SOP or I'm building a training program or whatever, it's because of all the external knowledge, not even just that I've experienced or my company's experience. It's everything else, all the stories that I've heard.
Yeah.
And so really hiring that outside company like yourself is, I think, crucial as far as really knowing what's going on in the industry instead of just, oh, well, this is what happened to us and 2 years ago and now
Yeah.
like we want to tell everybody about it. No, it's a lot deeper than that.
It is, and of course, like, I'm a bit partial because I work for a trading company, but also I've been in the place where I've either contracted a trading company, to come in and manage our trading content, but I've also been responsible for creating and maintaining and distributing and identifying, the audience and everything. And I will say, with the regulatory changes that can happen,
Yeah.
literally daily, there's changes that happen and are published in the Federal Register on a regular basis. Being responsible as a trade compliance practitioner for all of like the export business or even like the import business, but also then going, oh shoot, I need to update that training, which is a SCORM package. So I have to update the training on my side and whatever we use to create it. And then I have to coordinate with our HR team to get it replaced.
Yeah.
And then
Jeez.
we have to get it if it's a big enough change that we need to educate people like, hey, I know you learned it this way, but things have changed. And so like coordinating all of that internally is such a mess. And truly the benefit of utilizing a third party with that stuff is you don't have to worry about the content being up to date because we do that for you.
Yeah. That's literally what
You
you
don't
guys do all day. Yeah.
yeah, like and even like designing the content and making it interesting and just because you know trade compliance doesn't necessarily mean that you're a good educator of trade
Yeah.
compliance.
Sometimes it'd be real boring.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it'll be, it'll just be a bunch of words on a page and it's
Yeah.
not going to be engaging and people are just going to they're not going to absorb it. They'll click through it. So, relying on a company that specializes in that production value and that keeping it educational but entertaining is my goal with everything. Utilizing a third party, I guess, it just takes that pressure
Yeah.
internally off of having one more thing to manage because trade compliance managers have so many balls in the air and so many different things that they're responsible for. I can guarantee that keeping training content up to date is probably not at the forefront of their
I was gonna
minds.
say, and the time they spend on that, really, it would be worth to me, like, I don't think people understand the value of your time. Like,
Yeah,
even as a company, like, you can make this person do so much more if you
yeah,
make whatever time that they're spending on something mundane, like
Yeah,
with the company
our
or automated?
100% of our focus is creating training content and making it entertaining and educational.
Yeah.
It's like 5% of a trade compliance person's job
Right.
within their organization. So I always feel, again, I work for the company, so of course I'm going to say it, but also I was a client of this company before I came over. So like I know
That's
as
a
a
big
client the
thing.
value,
Yeah.
yeah, of utilizing it. And I still firmly believe that, yeah, you can manage it internally for sure. And you can do it for, whatever you're already paying the person that's going to create it. Or you know that it's going to be 100% right 100% of the time, and it's going to be accurate and up to date, and you can just pay for that ease of mind.
So with Trump being in office and all the crazy things that he's been doing, I'm sure it's
Yeah.
like you guys are like constantly having to redo it all the time, right? Is this kind of like normal? Is this normal for a president to change this much, or is this like this term is like, wow, we're constantly having to redo our training?
This is like a very loaded question. So
I mean, let's get all
potentially
political.
very
I just
loaded
was
question.
wondering.
So, we try to keep the content to where it's at a high enough level that when little things change, the content doesn't necessarily need to change.
Gotcha.
When we're talking about content changing, it's recently Syria was removed from the OFAC sanctions list. So now going in and removing all of the references to Syria from that. So we're talking like
Gotcha.
bigger policy changes, not necessarily like Trump's adding new 232 investigations into pharmaceuticals, and now we have to go change our tariffs uh, information to include
Right.
pharmaceuticals. Like we
Yeah.
try to keep a high enough level to where we don't have to do those daily changes, but still in the weeds enough where it's providing information specific to maybe like section 232, but not necessarily drilling down to all of the different investigations that are under section 232.
Yeah. Because like I said, that can literally has changed daily.
Yeah. Yeah. And even anti dumping and countervailing duties, having a training that speaks to what anti dumping and countervailing duties are, but doesn't drill down enough to where it's like, here's all of the anti dumping and countervailing duty,
Right.
things that all of the particular, you can clearly see this is outside of my realm of
No, you're good. You're good. I
expertise
don't even
here.
know what you're talking about. So I'm like, whoa, I need to Google this.
Like the different, minerals or whatever that happen to be part of the anti-dumping and countervailing duties, like, we don't drill down into the specifics of that, but it's high enough level where after taking this training, I understand what anti-dumping and countervailing
Yeah.
duties are
Yeah.
and why they're important and how they affect my business.
Yeah, almost like a for dummies, like, learn this, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Yeah, because
Ye
like, a lot of times I want to, learn all the things, but, like, I don't need to necessarily get in the weeds, especially if that's not my department, right? Like, I don't need to
Yeah.
know all those things, but I need to know of it, so that way I'm
Yeah.
aware. Very
Yeah,
cool.
exactly. Or like you hear about it and you know that it's affecting the costs. So like say you work in supply chain and you're responsible for bringing in new products into your organization in order to sell, or you're responsible for buying for your manufacturing processes, but you don't understand why the last time you ordered it, it cost, 10 cents a part to order it, but now it's 35 cents a part to order it. Understanding, oh, tariffs are applying to it. There's new duties that are applying to it. So again, you don't necessarily need to know how, from a practitioner's perspective, how it
Yeah,
works, but understanding that prices can fluctuate depending on, those different import duties and taxes.
yeah, and kinda planning for that big level.
Hmm.
Very
Yeah,
cool.
for sure. Yeah.
Well, how can,
Um,
anybody reach you and your company and all that stuff? I keep
yeah,
saying all
you
that
can,
stuff.
well, you can find me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I like to post a lot of educational and entertaining pieces. They tend to be educational, professional, yet snarky about different export trade regulations
Love
and
it.
history of different things. So you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find my company at www.skilldynamics.com. And if you are interested in training, there is a contact us form on there that you can reach out to get in contact with our sales team, or you can send me a message on LinkedIn and we can get you connected with our salespeople.
Love it. Well, thanks so much for coming on. I know I learned a lot. Hopefully everybody else here did too. And hopefully they send this over to their, I guess it would mainly be like their shippers who would send to their manufacturers, right? That's the levels that would go up.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, distribution channels. I mean, really, there's fraud that is all through the supply chain.
Yeah.
That there's something that anybody can learn from all of it. And if there's ever any questions anymore about the supply chain fraud or different ways to mitigate it, again, I'm on LinkedIn. You're welcome to reach out. I love talking about trade compliance. So be careful when you ask the question. You might get more than what you anticipated. But I have a real strong passion about talking about this stuff and educating it.
Well, that's why you're doing what you're doing. I mean, that's why I ended up where I am is because I was so passionate about compliance and compliance
Hmm.
on the over the road stuff and fraud and cargo theft. And had cargo theft hit me, and I was like, I never letting this happen to me again. How do I know all the things? And so
Yeah, what did
that's
I
probably
miss?
what I
Yeah, like,
miss.
and
And
yeah, going back and, like, just dissecting it all. What did I miss? What should I have seen?
yeah,
How can we make sure that this doesn't happen in the future? And that's really, I mean, that's the what the mortem of it all. You tear
yeah.
apart. Okay, this happened. How can we make sure this doesn't happen again? And a
I'm
lot of
like
it's education and training.
totally, totally, totally. I'm like the type of person that I don't like to be wrong. And so
Yeah,
whenever something
same.
goes bad, I'm like, how was I wrong here? I have to fix
How,
this so I'm
what did
never
I miss?
wrong again. Yeah. I'm never gonna
Yeah,
be wrong again ever. Yeah.
you might get it past me one time, but you will not get it past me
Yeah.
again. That's how
Never
I am too.
again.
Is like you might sneak past me once, but I will learn all of your ways, and you will never get around me again.
Yeah. In any other direction, I will dissect all the stuff. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
thanks
for
so much
sure.
for coming on. I really
Yeah,
appreciate it. I'm
thank
so
you for
glad we
having me.
met and all that
Me
stuff.
too.
I have to thank
Yeah.
Nathan for that. But
Yeah, Nathan is like, see, he's seriously, and let's like shamelessly plug the Supply Chain
yes.
Social because if you are a global trade compliance professional, they have the Global Trade Cafe. Oh my gosh, Global Trade Cafe monthly, where all of us from all over the world, there's trade compliance people from all over the world that
Mhm.
attend, and I constantly feel like I am not the smartest person in the room, which is so refreshing.
Yeah.
There's all these people, there's no shame. You ask questions. People are happy to share and educate. And, if you know something and somebody else doesn't, they're always like receptive and understanding. And the conversations are great. I know the same thing on the Warehouse After Dark
Yeah.
for the supply chain side of it. But yeah, I'm really glad I fell into that because I've met a lot of
Totally.
great people. We would have never met had I not attended that holiday party virtually. So yeah, it's been really great. I'm so excited. Thank you so much for having me. And
Yeah,
this
for sure. I
conversation
really
was so
appreciate it.
fascinating.
I know. I love it.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. And everybody reach out to Julie if you guys need anything or Nathan Cheney too. He's a good
Yeah.
connection out there. If
He
you
is
need
for sure.
anything in the world, that's got to go to. Anyways, bye you
Absolutely.
guys.